Well, first of all, let's remind our audiences that this is the first time since the war with Pakistan in 1971 that India has crossed over into Pakistani territory to conduct airstrikes. Usually skirmishes around the line of control, which is the de facto border for Pakistan and India, is not uncommon, but strikes of this nature are extremely rare. As you heard the Foreign Secretary over there, he did say it was a preemptive strike, and he did say that, that these militants from the Jaish-e-Mohammed, which is the group that claimed the attack that took place earlier this month in Kashmir, that they were planning other attacks on Indian territory, and Indians are claiming that 300 odd militants were killed in this attack. Pakistan, on the other hand, is downplaying this attack. They're saying that there was no damage from these airstrikes, there were no casualties. In fact, the Pakistani army spokesman said earlier today on Twitter that the Indian jets had to scramble hastily and leave hastily after dropping their payload because Pakistani jets were gathering. So we're getting conflicting narratives of what really went on over there. This is not uncommon. This has happened before in 2016 after India launched a so-called surgical strike just across the border after one of their army camps was attacked by militants. So these kinds of conflicting narratives are common from India and Pakistan. It shows that both the countries want to come out on top.
Breaking news this hour. Pakistan says it has shot down 2 Indian aircraft which it claims were over Pakistani airspace. The Pakistani military also says its warplanes carried out airstrikes inside India. India says the Pakistani jets were forced to retreat by its own aircraft, but has not confirmed whether any of its planes were shot down. Well, details are still emerging, but a spokesman for the Pakistani Armed Forces, Major General Asif Ghafoor, has tweeted this. He says that in response to Pakistan Air Force strikes, the Indian Air Force crossed the line of control, the LOC, in Kashmir. He goes on to say that Pakistan shot down 2 Indian aircraft inside Pakistani airspace. One of the aircraft fell on Pakistan-controlled Kashmir, that's written here as AJ and K, and the other fell inside IOC, that's how Pakistan refers to Indian-controlled Kashmir. He finishes by saying that 1 Indian pilot was arrested by Pakistani troops on the ground.
Pakistan says it has shot down 2 Indian fighter jets which it reports were over Pakistani airspace. 2 pilots, it said, were now in custody. Islamabad also claims its warplanes carried out airstrikes inside India. Delhi says the Pakistani jets were forced to retreat by its own aircraft, but it hasn't confirmed, well, in fact, it's confirmed that one of its aircraft was shot down, but not a second. Well, the latest escalation is understood to have taken place in and around the disputed region of Kashmir, parts of which are both controlled by Pakistan and India. Both countries' troops there are on the highest alert. Comes 24 hours after the first Indian airstrikes inside Pakistan since 1971, which followed a suicide bomb attack by Islamic militants in Indian administered Kashmir, left 40 Indian paramilitaries dead. Well, a short time ago, we had the first official reaction from Delhi, this by a spokesman, Ravish Kumar, explaining that Indian strikes on Tuesday had been based on credible evidence that the alleged militants they targeted were planning further attacks.
As Vice President Mike Pence arrives in Colombia, he is set to meet with the man the U.S. recognizes as the president of Venezuela, Juan Guaido, following a weekend of violent clashes over humanitarian aid shipments. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo keeping his options open when it comes to Venezuela.
We've said every option's on the table. We're going to do the things that need to be done to make sure that the Venezuelan people's voice, that democracy reigns, and that there's a brighter future for the people of Venezuela.
All right. Former senior Venezuela envoy to the U.S., Isaias Medina, joins us now. Isaias, welcome and thank you for coming on America's Newsroom this morning. Important to hear your voice as we saw that weekend of unrest over the weekend. First, your thoughts this morning, sir.
Thank you so much, and good morning, Sandra. Thank you for having me, and thanks to President Trump, Vice President Pence, to Secretary Bolton, to all the U.S. team that has been working to try to bring, the help that Venezuelan people need from the U.S. and from our allies around the world. I have to tell you, the world has witnessed the atrocity crimes of not only Maduro's proxy armed militias, but also by Cuban-led military that have been committing these ongoing violations of human rights and crimes against humanity. And it is time that right now in Colombia, with the special presence of Vice President Pence, with the presence of our interim constitutional president, Juan Guaido, and with President Duque and all the rest of the Lima Group representatives, that there comes out a decisive, uncompromising ultimatum with a very short deadline. This is very important.
Traffic jams for as far as the eye can see. Venezuelan security forces have set up roadblocks in an effort to show their allegiance to Nicolas Maduro's government and to slow down Venezuelans headed to the nation's borders after the opposition called on them to create a humanitarian convoy this coming Saturday.
We're at a roadblock on the way to San Antonio, near the border with Colombia. Soldiers want to stop people here so they don't join the Great March. Maduro's days are numbered. He's disgraceful.
Look, this is just a taste of what happens every day. The violence, nothing is achieved. We're victims of this on a daily basis.
With tensions running high, scuffles with National Guards broke out at a roadblock. Opposition leader Juan Guaido also left Caracas in a convoy, with the goal of making the 800-kilometer trip to the Colombian border, where U.S. aid is being stockpiled. Meanwhile, Nicolas Maduro has closed the Brazilian border and is thinking of doing the same with the Colombian one. He's blocked the aid, saying he doesn't lead a nation of beggars and that it's a precursor to a U.S. military intervention.
Russia's Security Council has warned that the U.S. is getting ready to intervene in Venezuela and topple embattled President Nicolas Maduro. Up to now, Washington has only thrown its support behind self-declared President Juan Guaido, slapping sanctions on officials in Maduro's government as well. It's also urged other Western nations to back the removal of the democratically elected president from power. Well, the Secretary of the Russian Security Council now says that U.S.
The United States Special Operations Command will be changing strategies in the near future. This is according to a new report. But instead of targeting radical terrorist groups, their focus could change to major nations like China and Russia. RT's Rachel Blevins joins me now with the details. Rachel, what's the reason for the significant change in strategy?
Well, Sarah, the officials who are in favor of this change of mission claim that it's simply time for special forces to rebrand. And they say that the military can't keep solving today's problems with conventional methods. So when looking at the new Pentagon National Defense Strategy, it will adapt to the digital age by taking a larger role in cyber warfare, information, and digital age propaganda. The head of the Pentagon Special Operations argued that the nature of war does not change, but the character of war has changed radically in the last 15 years. And in the aftermath of 9/11, the United States focused entirely on defeating terrorist groups in the Middle East. A single authorization for use of military force that gave the president the power to go after al-Qaeda and associated extremist groups was used to justify military action in Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, Syria, and Somalia. And the war on terror has cost nearly $6 trillion. While some would argue that Americans are not any safer in 2019, others have noted that the U.S. military is now operating in 40% of the world's countries as a result.
Запуская ракетные мишени средней дальности и размещая в Румынии и Польше пусковые установки, пригодные для применения крылатых ракет «Томагавк», США эти требования договора прямо и грубо нарушили. Россия будет вынуждена создать и развернуть виды вооружений, которые могут быть использованы не только в отношении тех территорий, с которых для нас будет исходить соответствующая прямая угроза, но и в отношении тех территорий, где находятся центры принятия решений по применению угрожающих нам ракетных комплексов. Мы не заинтересованы в конфронтации и не хотим ее, тем более с такой глобальной державой, как Соединенные Штаты Америки. Мы видим, что имеем дело с деятельными, очень талантливыми людьми. Однако среди правящего класса США много и таких, кто излишне увлечен идеей своей исключительности и своего превосходства над всем остальным миром. Разумеется, это их право думать так, как они хотят. Но считать-то они умеют? Умеют наверняка. Пусть посчитают дальность и скорость наших перспективных систем оружия. Мы просим только об этом. Пусть сначала посчитают, а уже только после этого принимают решения, которые могут создать дополнительные серьезные угрозы для нашей страны.
Well, tonight, Russian state TV has identified McClellan as a target if there is ever a nuclear strike. An anti-American news program showed this map right here reporting hypersonic missiles Russia is developing could be fired from submarines hitting McClellan, Fort Ritchie in Maryland, and Jim Creek in Washington within 5 minutes. Sacramento County's Office of Emergency Services is not commenting on this, other than saying it wouldn't know why Russia would target McClellan, which was deactivated in 2001.
Two issues between Canada and China. Number one, the arrest of the Huawei executive in Canada. Number two, China is holding Canadian citizens. Joining us now, David Mulroney, former Canadian ambassador to China. Mr. Ambassador, are the Canadians held in China hostages?
There's no doubt about that, Stuart. And the Chinese officials, the ambassador to Canada, have said as much, that indeed this is tit for tat because of the arrest in Vancouver of Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou.
So the arrest of the Huawei executive, that is all lumped in to the trade deal and Canada-US-China relationship. It's all one big cake, right?
It's all connected. And one of the points of connection, there's been real controversy in Canada recently over whether the Huawei case has been politicized and whether it's a side issue. But at one point, the issue is the same. It's whether China plays by the rules and obeys its own laws and international law. Same issue.
How do Canadians feel about this? Are they a little annoyed, maybe, at America?
Well, we've had a confusing couple of weeks, to put it mildly. Our ambassador to Beijing, a man named John McCallum, who was a former cabinet minister in Canada, which is a bit of a rarity to have to move from the political side to the public service. He gave a couple of speeches in which he said he thought that Ms. Meng had a strong case, very odd for an ambassador to say, and two, that it would be great, as in his words, if she were returned to China. This generated a lot of controversy, and ultimately Prime Minister Trudeau had to fire him. So the number two is running things in Beijing, but it really muddied the waters.
We recognize China is an extremely important and growing economy, a significant player on the world stage. We look forward to continuing to trade with China, but we need the Chinese authorities to understand that when it comes to the rule of law, Canada and an awful lot of other countries will stand firm.
As a rift between Ottawa and Beijing widens, sparked by Canada's arrest of Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou and the subsequent arrest, detainment of two Canadians, there are new worries about how the diplomatic tensions are affecting business ties between the two countries. China is Canada's third largest trading partner, and with billions of investment dollars at stake, the business community is getting worried. Katie Simpson on how they're managing the uncertainty.
When it comes to products this country is known for, this is about as Canadian as it gets. Producers send maple syrup all around the world, and it's becoming more popular in China.
Any exporting company has to really consider being in Asia in general, because this is where the growing, the buying power is.
Citadel is one of Canada's largest syrup exporters. It won't reveal how much it ships to China for competitive reasons, but it hopes to increase sales to Chinese customers by 500% over the next 5 years. The company is closely following the diplomatic dispute between Ottawa and Beijing, and while it hasn't hurt business yet, there is anxiety the hit could come.
If it continues and if it goes bad, obviously, we anticipate that there could be some commercial setbacks.
A senior business source tells CBC News Canadian corporate leaders are in panic mode, worried prospective deals with Beijing are at risk. The government is keeping them updated, but it can't offer any assurances that China is through retaliating.
The bottom line is that businesses hate uncertainty.
The president of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce is careful to choose his words.
I'm not aware of any business that has said we have decided to pull out of China as a consequence. But there's no question that people are looking more carefully than they would normally and examining whether this is the appropriate time to be taking further steps.
That's the question for Citadel. Managers have plans to travel to Shanghai for a food show in May.
If the situation continues to decay, and we'll see if it's appropriate to go.
There's very little chance this dispute will be resolved by spring, which means Citadel and other Canadian companies have some tough choices ahead. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Ottawa.
President announced her re-election bid this week amid a boost in her popularity following her rejection of a peace deal with China. In contrast, the Taiwanese opposition party leader has promised to sign a peace treaty with Beijing if indeed his party is able to regain the presidency in 2020. Evangelos Sipsas reports.
For China, this island is part of its own territory. But for Taiwan, China is a threat. If you believe the Western media narrative, this free democratic land needs to defend itself from the imperialist ambitions of Xi Jinping's government.
China's threats to forcefully retake the island.
Not just engaging in belligerent rhetoric, it's trying to cut Taiwan off further from the business community, making them redraw their maps that Taiwan is part of China.
It has long refused to rule out the use of force to achieve that goal.
Taiwan has looked to the West ever since it split from mainland China in the wake of the Civil War in 1949. But the vast majority of the UN members have never recognized it as an independent country. And Beijing has always stuck to its one China policy.
Taking responsibility for the nation and future generations, both sides should pool our wisdom, resolve the political rivalry, and bring about sustainable peace across the Taiwan Strait with a long-term vision for reunification of the motherland.
Now Taiwan's opposition Kuomintang Party is determined to finally resolve the dispute. But it will have to wait until the presidential elections in 2020.